So here's the thought. What if the whole point of life wasn't just, being a good person, but actually becoming like God? Sounds pretty wild, right? Well, that is the incredible promise right at the heart of Orthodox Christianity. And today, we're going to dive into this ancient path. We'll see how it completely changes the way you might think about who God is, who we are, and where this whole thing is headed. All right, so where do we even start a journey like that? Well, you got to start at the very top. I mean, before we can even begin to figure ourselves out, we have to wrestle with the biggest, most fundamental mystery of all. How in the world can we even begin to talk about God? And right away, you run into this huge paradox, right? If God is truly God, I mean infinite, completely beyond anything our minds can grasp, then how could we ever know him? It just doesn't seem to add up. It feels like this massive contradiction you can't get past. But this is where orthodoxy offers a really profound way forward. Okay, so here's the key. Orthodox theology draws this super important line between God's essence and his energies. Think of the essence as, well, God's inner being, what he is in himself. And that part, totally, completely unknowable to us. But, and this is the game changer, God isn't some distant, abstract idea. He's constantly reaching out, revealing himself through what are called his energies. This is his life, his power, his love in action all around us. And get this, these energies aren't just something from God. They are God, fully and truly. That's how he can be both completely transcendent and, at the same time, intimately present and knowable. You know, St. Gregory of Nyssa has this amazing way of describing it. He paints this picture of standing on the edge of a sheer, steep cliff. He says that's what it feels like when the soul tries to grasp God's infinite nature. It's this dizzying, awe-inspiring feeling. It's a kind of unknowing, but instead of being empty or scary, it actually opens you up to this mind-blowing experience of the living God, someone who is way, way beyond us, but also right here with us. So this way of seeing God, as both totally beyond us and totally knowable, that has huge implications for how we see ourselves. If that's who God is, then who are we? And what's our starting point in all of this? Well, the writer Olivier Clement put it perfectly. He said, man is nostalgic for paradise. And isn't that true? There's this deep, universal feeling inside all of us, this longing for a connection we feel we've lost. It's the starting point of the whole spiritual quest. It's that nagging sense that we were made for something more, something better. And that feeling, that's the echo of where we came from. And this leads us right to the Orthodox view of original sin, which might be different from what you've heard. Here's the key difference. It's not about inheriting guilt, like we're somehow legally responsible for what Adam did. It's about inheriting a kind of brokenness. It means we're born into a world that's already tilted, a world where it's just plain easier to mess up than to do the right thing. It's like being born into a spiritual exile, separated from God, who is the source of all life. There's this incredibly moving line from the Orthodox funeral service that just captures the deep, personal sadness of this separation. It's this heartbreaking reminder that we were made for something glorious, but by turning away from God, we lost that ancient beauty and found ourselves subject to mortality. Okay, so if we're broken, if we're in exile, how do we get back home? What's the way back? Well, this is where the Orthodox Church offers a path. It doesn't see itself as a courthouse for the guilty, but more like a spiritual hospital for the sick. It's a place that offers a real, tangible path to healing and finding our way back to that communion with God. And the ultimate goal of this path, the destination of the journey, is something called theosis. You can also call it deification. Now hold on, this does not mean we literally become God. Not at all. It's about being invited to share in God's own divine life, to become, through his grace, what he is by his very nature. It's a kind of cooperation, a partnership, where God is the one doing the work and we are cooperating with him. So how do we cooperate? How do we do our part in this partnership? Well, the church gives us the tools. You can think of it in three big ways. First, they're the sacraments, or mysteries. This is where God's grace meets us in a very real physical way. Second, there's asceticism, and that's not about self-punishment, it's spiritual training, like an athlete. It's about struggling against our inner brokenness to reorient our lives back towards God. And third, there's prayer. This is the direct line, the path to communion, especially a kind of deep prayer called prayer of the heart. And a perfect example of this prayer of the heart is the Jesus prayer. It's really simple. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. This is a super powerful tool. The idea is to repeat it over and over, so it syncs up with your breathing and becomes this constant, quiet rhythm in the background of your life. It's a way to keep your heart always turned towards God, even when you're busy with a million other things. Okay, so we've been looking at this really deep, personal, spiritual journey. But this path didn't just appear out of nowhere. It has a long, fascinating, and sometimes complicated history. So now let's kind of zoom out from the individual and look at the big picture, how this ancient faith traveled across the world and eventually found a home right here. Man, the Orthodox family tree is seriously ancient. The first major split happened all the way back in the 5th century. Yeah, the 400s, over some really deep questions about who Christ is. Then, a few centuries later, you have this huge expansion north as missionaries evangelize the Slavic peoples. Now, fast forward a long way to 1794. That's when the first Russian monks landed in Alaska, officially starting the Orthodox presence in North America. But the real explosion in numbers? That happened in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, when huge waves of immigrants from Greece, the Middle East, and Eastern Europe brought their faith with them to America. So because of that history, what you see in America today isn't one single, unified Orthodox church. Instead, it's this really diverse family of what are called jurisdictions. You've got the Greek Archdiocese, the Antiochian, the OCA, the Russian, the Serbian, the Coptic, the Armenian, and more. Each one has its own unique cultural flavor and history. But here's the crucial part. They all share the same core faith. It's actually pretty amazing to see how this one faith has put down roots in so many different cultures. All right, so we've looked at where the journey starts, we've looked at the path itself, so there's one last piece of the puzzle. Let's talk about the destination. What is the Orthodox perspective on the end of the journey? And the end of all things? You know, when a lot of people think about the end times, they think of destruction and fear, but the Orthodox view is really different. It's overwhelmingly about hope and transformation. The end of history isn't seen as this big cosmic wipeout. It's seen as the birth of a new creation, a moment when everything and everyone is transfigured and made new. And this leads to a really fascinating understanding of heaven and hell. The idea is that they aren't two separate places that God sends people to. Instead, they are two different ways of experiencing the exact same thing, God's all-encompassing love. For those who have opened themselves up to that love, it's paradise. It's an endless, dynamic journey deeper into God's mystery. But for those who have spent their lives rejecting that love, that same presence is experienced as pain or torment. The idea is that the doors of hell are locked from the inside. The choice is always ours. And that brings us to this final, beautiful thought from St. Irenaeus. He basically says that this journey of learning and growing in God's love, it never, ever stops, not even in the age to come. It's not about finally arriving at some static destination where you know everything. It's about an eternal journey, an endless adventure of moving from glory to glory. And that journey, it doesn't start after we die. It starts right here, right now, and it never, ever has to end.